Welcome to Vision 2021 at the Cape Cod Museum of Art. Director Benton Jones is right behind the camera, and he's going to walk around with me, and we're going to try to give you a little overview of what this show is.
Hi, everybody.
Can we see Benton? Come on over, Benton.
I can come over and say hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
To be honest, Benton and I started out on one of the committees to make it more available to artists to apply for shows here at the Cape Cod Museum of Art. So we started out on that committee. And then I moved over to the exhibition committee once we formed that. During our talks at the exhibition committee and looking over all the different artists that we have, Deborah Pressman and Shaul Dahlstrom had an idea for a show that would involve texture and walking into, a room that was more like meandering through a forest. So that's how the start of this exhibit started. But the thing was, Sean had a different commitment and I inherited the curator's position.
And we were very lucky.
Oh no, thank you very much, Benton. Now, Deborah Pressman had many artists available for the idea she had in her mind. And once we started talking, I also had artists that I thought would fit the idea of the show. Trouble was, we had to merge our two minds as far as I visualized one thing, Deborah had different ideas. So we had to kind of back and forth and integrate what the show was about. When I taught art years ago, with little kids and all that, sticks, stones, and making art under the trees and sand, and that was all part of our education, even in the 70s, 80s. So that's nothing new. What we love about this show is, as I said at one of my presentations to the committee, was, Giotto was considered a great artist, but he was a craftsman. The guild used to go around from town to town with their stamps and forms and create their art. And today we say they're fine artists. Well, when I grew up in the 60s and was in education in the 60s, craft and art were always kind of at odds.
Yeah.
I love crafts, but the fine arts were revered. And so I was always kind of like, But I've come to see through the years, do what you think is best, because actually arts and crafts have a marriage. And Warren Seelig and I had an evening of bantering.
One of the artists in the exhibition.
Yes, a fabulous artist, was Professor Emeritus in Philadelphia. He'll speak later. But he said, like, with lino cut, that's a craft. And I said, yes, it is. I said, but you have to learn your craft as an artist in order to present your art. Because if you don't have the craft, it locks you. You can't do the beautiful things you wish to do. And the whole point of this show is, it isn't important what things are made of. It isn't that I want to be a sculptor, but I don't have $1,000 to cast my work in bronze. Your imagination is open, and whatever you use, but line, design, form, they're always the essence of art.
And I think one incredible thing about this exhibition is you might see materials that you've seen in use in traditional ways, like we have textile, we have wood, we have stone, we have encaustic, but the way that it's being used here is non-traditional. So it gets the viewer, and I like to think even, especially the younger generation, to think outside of the box. Sure, everything is created with incredible craftsmanship, but it's a craftsmanship that most of these artists developed on their own. They developed a way of working with these materials in a very articulate and profound way, but they taught primarily themselves. So it's inspiring to a younger generation who also might consider coming into the arts.
I'll interject in that. While we work on our own art and in our own way, most people have great backgrounds, because, to be honest, when I was in school for studying art, you spend years of what is beauty, what is aesthetics, what is this, what is that, so it gives you the background. What we're talking about is, you learn is, okay, how do I crochet plastic? You know, nobody's going to teach me that class.
For instance.
Okay? For instance. Or can I sew a piece of thread into ceramic? So these are the things, but it's years of experimentation. And, you know as a printmaker, I'll try something, and every time I do a piece, I always think, okay, now I've learned this. I go to the next one, and it doesn't work. So you're self-creating all the time, and you're self-learning in the sense of, it worked here, it didn't work there, why?
Right.
And I think one of the things I've been thinking about, Ben, what is an artist? And I think basically, we're creative and curious. You're always curious about, how can I do something? How can I make this work? And I think that's a very important thing.
So I'm really excited tonight, or today, whichever time you're watching this, to meet some of the artists in this exhibition, to meet Deborah Pressman, who co-curated this exhibition, and to give you a tour of what has been an incredible response from the public. So come with us, and we'll have a look around.
Agree. Good.
Hello, Michelle.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi, Michelle.
Deborah, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
The school year has started for you, right?
Yes, it has.
So I have not met Michelle,
So what would you like to talk about, Michelle? You have the stage.
Octopus.
We can focus on any one of your works, or you could talk about them in general, or the curators could ask you questions. How would you like to proceed?
Oh, questions are probably good.
Well, so I based upon everybody's work in the show,
I can get out of the way, right?
story of sort of how you got to that point, I think is like really, really interesting.
I can't hear when I'm over there. Do you want me to stay over there?
I'm going to just turn it up so you can hear, okay?
Okay. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Okay,
You'll
wait a
meet
second.
this on Saturday.
Hi, Michelle. I have to run back and forth. Okay, you tell me which one you want me to point out if,
Well, I guess the octopus is from the earliest plastic work collection. I started making this work based on, well, when I learned about the plastic debris floating in the ocean, the North Pacific Gyre, and there's 7 gyres in the ocean where the plastic collects. I had been making work before that was talking about our interface with nature, but when I learned about the plastic debris in the ocean, I really wanted to focus on that. So I learned at about the same time that I could make a plastic yarn out of plastic bags, and also that I could crochet, or I learned to crochet to make this work. So I started making a recognizable group of work. So the centerpiece was a large octopus, larger than this one. And I made some jellyfish and coral and other types of recognizable ocean creatures. And as I learned more about what happens in the ocean with the plastic debris and how it breaks down, and also I felt like the recognizable creatures were less open-ended than some more abstract microscopic organisms. So I started to focus on other floating microorganisms in water. But the work, all of the work still remains about our interface with nature. And I really enjoy the brown plastics, particularly because they look so natural, and they kind of mimic a lot of natural fibers, but they are made of this stuff that never really goes away. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces.
Is there a specific relationship between octopi and the plastic bags? Do they have does the plastic affect the octopus in particular?
That's an excellent question. I do not know the answer. I think I think it's affecting everything in the ocean at this point, but it would be good to see if, it's not like they're climbing inside and getting stuck or that kind of thing.
I know they're such curious creatures. I thought maybe they they might get tangled up in them.
They might be crocheting down there.
Right, exactly. Incredible. Would you like to look at some of the other pieces here? We've had such an incredible response to your work from the public, and it communicates so clearly, I think, the relationship between humans and nature in really inspiring ways. So I just want to give you that feedback anyway.
Oh, thank you. I think I saw on some of the photos that there were some adjustments since I put it, I left my work, but I think the adjustments look fabulous. Is what my point was.
Can I interject there? You can hear me?
Yes.
I'm just that was standing front. You know what happened, Michelle? Like, your work is fantastic, but it was on the wall. It was like it needed something. Remember, I wrote to you and said a sculpture, and then when I saw this ladder, it was perfect.
Yeah.
But can you, I love this piece. And then again, it was a matter of making the wall visually coherent. It just looks, I think it looks beautiful.
It does. No.
So as far as the plastic, I mean, design-wise, it's gorgeous, but is there a significance with the balls hanging from the ladder tree?
Those pieces emerged out of a trip that I took to Africa, where I was seeing some beautiful hanging weaver bird nests. And, I think around here, we see a lot of plastic bags hanging up in trees. So I sort of put those two ideas together to make the hanging nests out of plastic.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. And what is the significance of the ladder? I have my own theories, but I'm sure they're different than everybody else's.
Ladders are hopeful, aren't they? They talk about movement, I think, and rising up. I think it's a hopeful.
Yeah. And you see the progression of the nests as they are also increasing in size as they escalate.
Right.
Yeah.
Deborah? This quiet Deborah, who usually is arguing with me.
I don't, it's just we're being recorded. Maybe that's, whatever. Yeah, no, I just
Jokingly.
I just feel like there's, such an emotional response to what you've made, Michelle, and then the wonder of transforming the plastic. It's, everyone that I tell about this, as I show, I've shown a lot of the postcards around, and I will say to people, so what do you think that's made of? And they clearly have no idea, and then they're absolutely awestruck when they hear it. And I think it will stay with people to really be thinking about our relationship to nature and this scourge of plastic that we live with.
That we produce more and more and more and more of.
Yeah,
I think the pieces that you've selected really have they have a cohesive theme, and they sort of talk about the sensitivity. They're much more about, I think, they're much more clearly about our interface. They, hands are present in some of the works, and and the ladder structure kind of relates to a home or a man-made intervention also. So
I'll just interject here because, Deborah and I are like kids in a candy store. It's like, we love it, we love it, we love it. We picked our things, but putting it together was really difficult. And that's why I said we jokingly argued, because it's like, there's a frustration to putting show together because you want to show the artist the best possible way you can. And while for design reasons, when I saw your ladder, it just kind of made your other work stand out. It gave a little bit of pause between one to the other so that people have a chance to see the works. And I think it looks outstanding. It's wonderful. Thank you.
So we have a couple moments before we move on to Joyce Udding Shutter And I was just wondering if you could tell us what class you're teaching. I understand you're teaching a class in a few moments.
I am teaching, it's my first time teaching a drawing with stitch and thread class. So
Oh,
totally relates to what you're looking at there.
the-
And those
yeah.
pieces are made with a material called Solvay, which is a water soluble interfacing. So I make my drawing on that material, close it up and stitch over it, and then I can just wash away that interface material. So it makes it much easier to create something like that. So I am going to cover that in my class too.
And where is the class, may I ask?
It's an online class, but it's taught through Lesley University.
Okay, wonderful.
And one other, as far as you did an installation in Boston in one of the parks
Oh, in
this
Arlington,
summer?
in Arlington, yes.
In Arlington. Yeah.
Great.
Persistent, and it's on the Minuteman Bikeway.
Is there any specific place you'd like to tell our viewers where they might see more of your work besides on the Parkway?
Oh boy. I have quite a number of shows up right now. There's a faculty show at Lesley College of Art and Design. There is a show called Upsurge 2 at Storefront Art Projects in Watertown. I have a large show up at Southern Vermont Art Center in Manchester, Vermont. I think there's quite a few. There's more.
Great. Wow. Well, thank you for taking the time to be part of this exhibition, and I look forward to seeing you, I hope, on Saturday, this coming Saturday.
I'm looking forward to it too. I was the first one to bring my work in, so I can't wait to see the whole show together.
Wow.
What I've seen looks beautiful. I'm really happy to be included. Thank you so much.
Well,
Thank
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
We'll look forward to meeting you.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
But I do want to start you off with this fabulous piece that you did. And I know it's very special to you and to your, if you could explain a bit more of what you were intending here.
It's interesting that somebody got it really well. It wrote in your comment book there.
Yes, I saw that.
The stones going down, if you were to flip the thing over, that would be like
Down here.
a stone circle similar to Stonehenge, only smaller, obviously. And those going down, but originally when I intended the piece to be able to flip so that the stones could be on top and the trees could be on the bottom, but I liked it better this way. So I don't like flipping it. It's also a little bit top heavy because the stones, although they're made out of paper, they have stone inside them in different points, but they're mostly made of welded steel and covered with paper. And it's about the relationship that we have had with the earth for millennia. And the Stonehenge thing is basically talking about the some of the first manipulation we did of things of the earth to facilitate and to acknowledge our relationship with the cosmos and also with the earth. So upending those stones, and in the original Stonehenge, there were lintels and not just the uprights. But then this sharing the ground is this grove of trees, and they're evergreen trees, looking very tall, but actually in scale, the tallest stones in Stonehenge are only about 30 feet tall. And that would make these trees only about 150 feet tall. or no, not about 90 to 100 feet tall, and many trees are much larger than that. And it's about how the very basis of our lives and our spirituality and our relationships are all intertwined with the earth. And it's a really obvious thing. And
I'll just,
yet,
I'll
it's something we
interject,
forget.
Joyce.
So,
I'll just tell you,
yes,
having been in the museum when people have been looking at it, they get it. And you know, one thing wonderful about a beautiful work of art is it does communicate with people. And I've had great responses to your work. And thank you for being in the show.
Right, and
Deborah, of
Oh,
course.
thank you.
Right. I think you mentioned to Deborah and I, when you were bringing in this piece, about how the trees can talk to each other, and the circle and that white fine
Yes.
filament that connects them.
I have some of this here, and I actually forgot to put what this is made out of on the list of materials, but this is roving wool.
Oh,
And I used it because of all the photographs, the microscopic photographs I looked at that show the mycorrhizal network, fungal network that is part of the soil that surrounds the roots of many plant organisms, trees, etc. A lot of it looks like this very, very fibrous and wonderful roving wool.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also little nubs of it if you look at some of the photographs of the mycorrhizal network. But this was an organic material that I could use intertwined with those roots to illustrate this. It's just such a fascinating fact that they've discovered, that how trees can communicate with each other and with this fungal network and with other species that share these networks. And the fungal fibers can store water in times of drought. They can help release substances that can protect the trees when the trees are under threat from certain kinds of insects and diseases. So it's an absolutely fascinating area.
Can we move on to
are you
another?
still there? Oops. I didn't want to report anybody. Oh well, I made a mistake. I wanted to remove her pin, and I cut her off.
Can you?
Do you have a phone number for her?
Oh, gosh, not a phone number. I don't have a phone number.
There she is.
Good.
I got her back.
Hey, Joyce.
She's coming. Okay.
I have so Joyce, this is Deborah. And this is your most recent work, is that right?
I lost you for a while and now I'm back. Who are you?
Oh, this is Deborah.
Oh, hi, Deborah.
Co-curator.
Hi. Is this is your
Yes.
most recent work, is that right?
Yes.
So I'm also fascinated by this whole organism, the tree understory, all the books about the communication of trees. So are you thinking of doing more work in this vein?
Yes, I'm sure I will. Actually, just a few minutes ago, I was over in the neighbor's yard grabbing roots of trees because they just dug up about 20 trees because they're adding on to their house. And these fantastic stumps were being pulled up today, and I got big pieces of the stumps because I love the roots. Of course, any of the fine fibrous roots didn't come up with it because they're using big machinery to get this up. But I'm sure I'll be using those and talking about that interrelationship. One of the things that I found really interesting about these roots is that some of the roots from one tree were actually physically connected to roots from a different tree, the same kind of tree, but the roots actually grew together. So
Joyce, I'm wondering if because we have just a few minutes to speak with you today,
Let's go to the
if we want to
phone.
look at some of the other work that you have in here.
okay.
So I'm going to roll over to,
The claw.
would you like to see, you choose the one that you would like to talk about.
Well, either one.
Okay.
It's not a good angle to look at the what goes around one because the piece behind it kind of obscures it. But
Yeah, well, we can approach it from any angle.
well, this is just about how different life forms are interconnected. And I wish I could have given you a whole list of all the things that are in there that are between the layers of paper pulp.
Let me
But
just,
one of them, here are some, I don't know where my camera is, over here. These are mayfly wings. And there are many, many different types of leaves and seeds and other organisms in there. And it's about how everything is interconnected.
Yeah, that's
And there's no front, there's no back. It just goes around and around and keeps going. And I had lots of fun with that just because in a way it seemed like a stained glass window and yet not a window.
wow.
What's fascinating to me as I'm hearing you talk and learning about your work is this, the conjunction of like stone and steel, very hard, with all of these very ephemeral materials. Can you talk
Well,
about
one
that
of
a
the
little?
reasons I started using the steel is because the paper I use, it's not from wood pulp, it's not from trees, it's either flax, which is the same plant as, flaxseed is in all your bread these days, but it's also what makes linen. And then the other is a fiber called abaca, which is from a specific species of banana plant that grows in the Philippines. And I beat this in my Hollander beater, the fibers, and it makes it opens up the fibers. And when the paper dries, it's basically beaten with water. But when it evaporates and dries, the paper shrinks so much that it can bend the steel.
Wow. Amazing.
And so and if I use wood, then when the wood gets wet, it works. So I would end up with something completely different than, and it would warp and get strange. And there are artists that use paper pulp to deliberately do that. But I just want to show you one thing.
Okay.
And that is what the paper pulp looks like.
Okay.
When I'm working with it.
Let me get you here.
And I should flip this around. I'm not sure I can flip it. So I'm going to have to turn my set this up. And
We can see that.
so you
sure.
can see what this stuff looks like.
Huh.
That's what the paper pulp looks like. And I've strained it. It's normally thinner than this, but I've strained it for about 5 hours so that it's easier for me to work with. But this, if I had this thickness, which is probably a half an inch, it would dry down to about 1.5 millimeters. So I have to
Incredible.
use a lot of this stuff, but it becomes very, very strong. And it doesn't have anything else in it except the fiber.
And I believe you mentioned that this piece also had that same material, right?
Yes, all of them do. It's
Okay.
it's the one thing that all of my pieces share is
Okay.
that this paper pulp, either flax or abaca, and it's a material I absolutely love because it's translucent, and it when it dries, it can be translucent, and it binds to itself, so it can shrink around the different elements. And now the different elements in this piece are, I have the maple samaras, which, you know, are the winged seeds of a maple. In this case, it's silver maple, that are in the main body of that. And then in the bottom of that are dried beans on the claw part.
Wonderful.
And I
Joyce, can you
took
just
off
explain?
Well,
you-
it's
oh,
15.
sorry.
It's too late.
Oh,
So
okay.
actually, it was wonderful to see the actual objects. So thank you so much, Joyce.
The paper.
So
Sure.
we're looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. And
Yes.
thank you for joining us and being explaining a little bit about your artwork. We hope that viewers will come and see them in person because they are spectacular.
Yes.
I am looking forward to meeting the other artists, whoever can come to the event on Saturday, because I'd love to hear about their work too.
Thank you,
So,
Joyce.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
thank you very much.
Hello, Lois.
Hi, Lois.
Hey, Deborah.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. We're going to have to get you to come to the Cape somehow.
Somehow it's hard to get me to the Cape, but that's okay.
Okay.
You might be able to do it. You might be able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now I'm
Maybe-
in Chicago, so.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Welcome, Lois.
Hello, how are you?
I'm Cecilia Rossey. I've communicated with you through many emails, but
I'm always glad to hear from you. Yes.
thank you. Well, your beautiful works have inspired and generated tons of conversation, and many people would love to talk to you because
Okay.
they're just so impressed with these beautiful works of art that you've created. I'm going to let Benton and Deborah continue, but we have you're 3 in a group, and then since we asked you to bring more, we've complemented other pieces of work with using a few other of your pieces around the room. So Benton will start off with this collection right in front of the camera.
Yeah. And hi, I'm Benton. We haven't met, but I'm the director of art here at the museum. And yeah, I've seen your work, but never in person. So I'm really excited to have some here at the Cape Cod Museum of Art.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm really glad to be there.
Do you want to
So
say
Lois,
it?
oh, go ahead, Benton.
No, go ahead, Deborah.
I mean, I just know, again, from showing photographs of your work to people, they can't possibly comprehend your process. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can
Yes.
you hear me? Okay, because I just got a weird message. Yeah, people go up to touch my work, which I really like, because I think that's the sign of a successful piece, when people just want to put their hands on it. And they expect it to be soft. And it's not soft. It's very sturdy and it's very hard. And then they are sure that it must be knitted, and it's not knitted. So I do find a lot of people when they get me in front of a piece of my work, even people who are not basket makers, saying, so how'd you do this? What is this made of? And it is all twining, which is a really ancient basketry technique. It's as simple as can be. It involves, hold on one second, I can demonstrate. It involves, this is how I teach my classes, 2 pieces of a weaver coming out between the spokes, and then one goes in front and behind, and then the next one goes in front and behind, and it just goes like that forever and ever. And what by determining how many uprights you have and the order in which you start your colors, you can make patterns. So if you have an even number of spokes and you have 2 colors, every time you're going to come around a basket, the whites are going to stack up on the whites and the blacks are going to stack up on the blacks, and you get columns. So what I do when I'm doing these is I make the base, and I have a whole pile of strings coming up from the base, and I start twining, and I will start at the bottom, and I will put in a mountain, and I'm not going all the way around the piece. I just do a section and I make a mountain. So there's a base, the next row, whatever pattern it is shorter, and then shorter, and then shorter. So I end up with a triangle. And then I do what's called a 3-rod whale, which is 3 weavers coming out of 3 spaces, so it's tighter. And I outline it. I outline that mountain. Then I move over, I make another mountain, and I outline that mountain. And I go around until I have a whole row of mountains. Then I start filling them in. So I fill in the valley, and I make another mountain. And as you can see, once you start doing this, you can make one side more steeper than the others. You can move it around. And every time I fill in a space, I use a different pattern.
So each one of those diamonds represents a mountain, is what you're referencing to. I see.
Yep. And each one of them is worked independently.
Oh,
Wow.
So, for the piece you're looking at right now, there's a blue and white section there. And I will start down at the bottom of that diamond and fill it all in, and then keep going to make another top.
Incredible. I'm sure
Yeah.
people ask you this all the time, and they've actually asked me multiple times since it's been installed. So I'll ask the obvious: how long would it take to make one of these?
When I have a booth show like at Craft Boston, my daughters tell me I should just make a sign. And
Right.
Each triangle averages an hour. Okay.
Okay.
Some of them are faster because it's just more straightforward. Others have a little bit of trickier stuff to them. But it averages out to about an hour. And then what I do now, the other thing that I do that I kind of invented, but there's nothing new in basketry, is if you look at one of the ones that's bumpier, this
Yes.
one,
Okay. I'll get.
Tell me if I'm being too technical. In order to do shaping with a basket, you have uprights, and you can control the shape. You can make it go out or make it come in 2 ways. And one of them is that you add additional spokes. It's very mathematical, because when you put in more spokes and then you're twining, you're actually pushing the circumference of that circle or that area out. So in order to make these got there, I will cram in additional spokes, which can be tough because you have to maintain the pattern as you're at it. And then I take away spokes. I can do all kinds of shaping, which is, of course, what happens with the teapot, with the spout and the handle. And that's why teapots just take forever, because you've got to do that, the shaping, while maintaining the pattern. So you're adding and subtracting spokes in the pattern, and it's crazy.
I do have to say, though, Lois, that people do absolutely admire the work. And then they look at it, because I'm in here so often, then they look at it, and then comes, how did you do this? And like, thank you so much for explaining to us, but I also have a question. The little bee on the top of your the jar, is that also worked as a twining? Look at the little bee.
No, that's just kind of, I need to make a bee, and how can I make a bee? And I wound things together, and
well, it's just a beautiful, beautiful little touch, and yeah.
Because on that piece, I never plan. I don't know what my pieces are going to be before. I usually start with a palette. I don't even really know what size I'm going to make them, because I can add the spokes, length to the spokes very easily. But I think about them while I'm working on them, and I try to tell myself stories about what I'm doing and what it looks like. And as I was working on this one, I said, this is what the world looks like to a bee flying over. It's really a world for a bee. And then I thought, well, that would be a nice thing to make, because we're destroying worlds that bees have. So I very consciously brought it up at the top, like the top of a traditional hive for a bee. And it began a whole series of pieces that were worlds for animals whose habitats we were destroying.
Would you like to look at the other works in the show? We have two other pieces that we can of yours that we can. I'll give you an overview of the space here.
That's Mo Kelman, you know that.
Beautiful. I'm going to get there. I'm going to buy
you dinner or something.
Lois, we were so happy that you were generous to send more objects that maybe we could use, because they accented the whole room, and I think enhanced other work for other people. As you can see, we've put a few around.
Go really well together.
Yeah, it just looks terrific.
When Deborah told me who was going to be in this exhibit, I went, oh boy, I'm impressed by myself being included in this crowd.
It's beautiful.
So I noticed that you also take the time to, oops, sorry. Well, I was just going to mention that you also take the time to line these with a double layer. And that is a lot of extra work, I am sure.
There's a sneaky reason for that. Because I am doing all of these short ends, the inside of my baskets when I'm done is a total mess. And in fact, I spent ages how to weave the back in, and it was driving me nuts. And then one day I was sewing, and I was putting a facing, and I said, oh, what I need is a facing.
Oh.
Beautiful. And I am curious about
we lost your video. We lost your audio.
I know. I keep. Is it back?
It's back now. Yeah.
Like to know about.
And then the metal basket is also in the show.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Well, you'll see it. It has a very nice home.
Oh, wow.
Can you kind of get it from this angle?
Yes, yeah.
What a great space you have.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very lucky
Can we
here.
get the whole wall or not? Careful.
Oops.
Hold on.
1 second here.
I'm here.
Okay.
Lois, your very smallest one I have here. The
Okay.
little tiny one. We were
Yeah,
afraid that if
enjoy
we, no, if we put it, we were afraid somebody would pick it up and put it in their purse. So we were like, no.
Yeah, that's happened,
Yeah, no, we
unfortunately.
were gonna let that happen.
In fact, it
So.
happened with a fairly large one.
Oh, God. Well, that is
Yeah.
also why the teapot is in the plexi.
Oh,
We were like,
have
not
I
gonna,
lost the sound again?
we have your sound, I have your sound.
Because I keep getting these messages from Zoom that I don't understand. I've been Zooming all day, and so what do you want me to tell you about this one?
I think we may have lost Benton or not. Yeah, so just free range. Go whatever you'd
well,
like to say.
This is totally different. This is not twine. This is random weave, which means that you create, you just start creating loops and then intertwining in the loops, and they hold each other together. People do it usually with vines traditionally, but I had all of this great wire around, and then I found these copper plumbing. You can't really see that there's copper, but it's copper and plastic plumbing things. And I said, well, these make holes, and stuck them in there. It's very heavy. People are always surprised at how heavy this piece is. Yeah, I really love doing this kind of work. And sometimes I need to do something besides twining.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I make all kinds of baskets. I do coiling and random weave and knotting, and I can even make a traditional basket. But people know me for my twined work, so there you go.
Well, but this one also works, I think, really well in the exhibit because there's so much about sort of inside and outside space and shadowing and so forth in a lot of the work. So it has a great relationship to some of the other pieces that other people have made.
Well, you mentioned the linings on my baskets. There's a very practical reason I need to cover up the mess. But also I think long and hard about what those linings will look like, because you can change the color and it changes the whole composition of the basket, the whole context. So I really do think a lot about inside and outside. I'm very much a 3D person. I have tried doing 2D once in a while, and I end up folding it and gathering it. And I just really, I like an inside. I'm not sure what that says about me psychologically, but I like an inside.
Wow.
And I like this one because you can look through it.
Right.
Yes.
It has holes all the way through it.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
While we have you just for one more moment, is there something in Chicago that brings you there?
Yes. I'm getting all this static. I am here because one of my children was living in England for 10 years, and she has just moved to Chicago with my two grandchildren. And so I'm here to help them.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I think I'm being helpful, but no, I'm having a wonderful time. They live right on the edge of the University of Chicago campus. So I have Hyde Park and the lake, and we've been exploring, and it's fun. It's fun.
Wow. Well, thank you for taking a moment from your family to let us know a little bit more about your work.
And it's great to meet you, Lois. I hope we have a chance in the future
Yes,
to meet.
I
Yeah,
will let you know. A friend and I are planning a trip to the Cape
wonderful.
to see this show. So I
So
will
let
get
me
there and
know
I'll
when
let
that
you know
is,
when I'm coming.
Lois, if you let
Yeah.
me know when it is, okay?
We'll
Just shoot me an
party.
email.
All
Again,
right.
thank you.
Take care, guys. And
Okay.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This is wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, Mo.
Hello, Mo. Welcome to the Cape Cod Museum of Art, discussion?
Hello, Mo.
Anyway, I have to tell you, Mo, I was so happy to be here when you were putting up your works, because so many people have asked me about how you hung it on the wall. Besides, of course, always it's beautiful and they admire the work, but they are curious. Anyway, this has been wonderful, and I do point out the shadows that the sculpture creates
What's
as part of.
the
So
title?
I'm going to let Benton and Deborah talk to you, and you can talk to us. Again, thank you for
Okay.
participating.
Sure enough. Thank you for having me. It's an
Great.
honor.
Hello, Mo.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi. I don't know, Benton, do you have a question? I mean, I always have questions. I always love, Mo, your story about how you sort of got to the place of making these amazing structures. But Benton may have something.
Well, I think the title I could share is Penumbra. I know what a umbra is. That's a shadow.
Right?
I'm not sure what a penumbra is, but I can see where the shadow comes in interplay, because it's fascinating, this interrelationship between material and non-material or negative material.
The title, the two pieces of mine that are hanging on the wall are both about aspects of the moon. So you're right about an umbra, and a penumbra is the transitional area between the light side of the moon and the dark side of the moon. So it's I guess you could say a sort of in the gray area.
Wow.
But I just have to, as far as maybe I would be clear, because people have admired the artistry, the magnificent artistry of the artists in the show. And when they look at your works, I mean, they're spellbound. But then, after all that, it's like, how did they do this? And can you explain the shibori a little?
Sure.
'Cause
So the work that I make is, you could call them tensile structures.
Maybe we could
So
decide.
I build skeletal structures, and then with those I integrate some sort of a membrane. And many years ago, I realized that a traditional Japanese technique called mokume shibori
Right.
would work perfectly for this. So what it involves is I start with a translucent silk fabric, silk organza, and mokume shibori involves stitching row after row after row of stitches, running stitches into the fabric. Actually, I don't know if you can do this, if you go up really close, you might even be able to see the needle holes from those stitches.
Yes, we can.
You might not be, yeah, I think you can see
Yep,
those.
oh, great, it's better, yes. Terrific.
And so the fabric is stitched. Then each row of stitches is pulled up really tightly so that it compresses the fabric, and then it's knotted so that that compressed form is maintained. When I then subsequently put the fabric into a dye pot, a hot dye, simmering dye, and Silk is what is called a thermoplastic fiber. And so it retains a memory of how it was shaped or compressed when it was subjected to heat. So after I dye the fabric, not only are the exposed areas of the fabric dyed black, but the compressed, or it's almost like an accordion shape that it was when it went into the dye bath, is also completely preserved in the surface of the fabric. So it becomes three-dimensional, long story short. And what it gives me is an elastic membrane that is patterned, and I can stretch that membrane and tether it to the skeletal structures I make in order to make my sculptures.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, mesmerizing.
Thanks. From this point of view, actually, if you pull back a little bit, maybe you can see where I endowed this piece with the concept of a penumbra. So where the tethers are tying off to the left, to the wall, you might see that as the light side of the moon. And then as you go toward the right, where there is a single layer of fabric, is the penumbra, and then to the right, the dark side.
I see.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Right.
I love the fact that all the materials you're using are so directly tied to nature in some way. And
Yeah.
the silk and the I don't know if that's bamboo or some, but it's all things that you might find naturally.
Right. There's some but bamboo in there, and also some rattan. I continue in my work to merge aspects of the built environment, architecture, industrial structures, and merge that with natural forms or forms inspired by nature. And I really like sort of taking those diverse structures and integrating them together.
What people might not know is that the piece actually penetrates the wall. And I thought that was fascinating, that was part of the installation process. Is it not only do the nails penetrate the wall, but the bamboo goes right into the wall.
Right, right, right.
I was the base.
So there's another work here that we could look at.
Sure.
Maybe I'll come around from this side.
Sure.
We're kind of Benton. We're.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this piece is titled Bestia, which is the Latin word for beast.
Mm-hmm.
I think the title came later for this piece. I think it came after I had actually constructed it. And there's a structure of wire, and then another skin of silk organza. And
See if
a
I can
little
get it.
hard to see the translucency here in terms
Yeah.
of the lighting, but there you go. I think you can see the shibori surface.
Mm-hmm.
So in this piece, you know, the wire is probably more related to mechanical structures. But then the overall form suggests something animate, some sort of a beast. Great.
And you make your own bases as well for your work here.
Right.
That's something that most artists let others do for them, but I think being able to control the stage, especially for this beast, is
Right.
also quite fascinating.
Right. So the all of these tensile structures, once they're removed from a gallery space and packed up in their boxes, they collapse. They pretty much lose their form. They only gain their form once they're tethered and anchored in space. So
Yeah.
this piece, the wire structure, is actually screwed to the top of the pedestal that it's resting on.
So I have a question for you, Mo.
Yeah, I do
Sure.
too.
Because you have, say, the cylinder, the circle, how do you prepare the shibori? Do you put them in panels and then work a section? Like, do you know it's 3 times
No.
what you need? How do you create the pattern to, because I know the shibori, you're shrinking it up.
I am shrinking it up. So, you know, I have to say I'm at least as much engineer as I am artist. And one of the things I really love about making things are the engineering challenges. So the fabric form is completely constructed, sewn
Anyway, you were in
into
the
a
camera.
form. Yeah, so it's sewn into a form before I do the shibori stitching. And Sis, you're right. Because the shibori technique in essence shrinks the fabric form, I have to do mathematical calculations of what percentage shrinkage I'll get in terms of length or width or a combination of both. Usually I get it right, and sometimes I don't, and I have to really rethink the form. And in fact, the piece we're looking at right now is a perfect example of a piece where I miscalculated and the entire form ended up having proportions that were much smaller than I intended. And I completely rethought how I was going to resolve the form in terms of attaching it to a skeleton. It was supposed to originally be a wall piece. It ended up being a beast on a pedestal.
We love the beast. I've always loved the beast.
So,
Thank
Mo, so when you're saying that, you know, if you take that wall pieces down and they just collapse,
Yeah,
so when you're making them to begin with,
yep.
how, I mean, you're envisioning the whole thing before, because you're not working on the wall, are you? I mean, so that's where it seems so fascinating that you go from these materials that end up on the wall, but once you take them down, it doesn't exist really, in a way.
Right. I guess you could say that I've worked through this process enough that it's become pretty predictable to me. And I'd have to say that the very first pieces I made using this combination of methods were much simpler, certainly, than what I'm doing now. So, you know, like any endeavor, your knowledge and your skills build, and you continue to challenge yourself and integrate in with
Do you
that.
draw out any of these?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
make patterns, and I make those patterns. You know, I have a calculator next to me, and I'm figuring out if I want to end up with a circle that's this big, I probably have to start with one that's that big. and figure out through compression of my mokume shibori techniques, how much bigger than the final form do I actually have to make the piece.
There's something in common with origami, it almost seems like, with all the folding, and even the materials, and just the idea that you start with a raw material, and then through the process, everything becomes condensed, even with meaning.
Can you get the transparency comes through? Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
I love origami. I love processes, especially ones that really involve a series of calculated processes, I guess you could say. And it's, it's not, I don't mean to say that my goal is purely to be an engineer, but without that, I just would not, I would not have the sense of making, starting with raw material and ending up with a form. So.
We were discussing before how an artist has to master his craft so that it doesn't interfere with the art. And I'll tell you, just right from when you were putting the piece on the wall, your planning, your dedication to having it smooth and clean and set up right, it's really outstanding.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
The only way you can really appreciate it fully is by moving around it.
Yes.
It changes in every angle.
Gorgeous.
Really spectacular. Thank you.
I really like simple materials. The simpler, the better, and simple processes. And it's a limitation that gives me freedom. Really, I think in order to feel freedom, we need limitations. We need to be able to bump into the edges of what's possible. And I just, when I was in 1987, I took a sabbatical from teaching and went to Japan for a semester. And what I saw there was profoundly affected my artwork and continues to, in terms of how structures are built, how in many structures, particularly, Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples, everything about the structure is evident. It lays bare its engineering. And that is something that I'm actually absolutely compelled to do with my work.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Are we going to be fortunate enough to see you on Saturday?
No.
No.
I'm so
Teaching.
sorry. I'm going to miss the opening. I'm going to be off teaching a workshop in the Berkshires.
Oh, that sounds lovely too.
I know, but all of the COVID rescheduling, I think, has put a number of us in positions of having 5 things happening at once.
That's right. We have a small window of opportunity.
Right. So no, I will horribly miss meeting the other artists at the opening. And I'm very honored to be in the show. It's an absolutely spectacular show. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for participating. It really is.
Yeah.
It's getting such rave reviews from among the people that are here. It's really wonderful. Thank you
Right.
for.
I'll give you a quick spin around so you can see, and the public can see a little bit of the exhibition. So I'll just zoom around the room here.
get Mosen?
I'm tethered with this extension umbilical cord.
I'm following him.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we have these rubber totems here that extend up to this piece here hanging from the skylights. Great.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank
Mo.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you so
Mo.
much.
Okay.
Good to connect virtually.
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Let's see. Hello, Josephine.
Hi,
Hi, Jody.
how are you? I want to just before we get started, I'm sitting outside. My daughter has music all afternoon, and I'm I've set myself up with a hotspot. I couldn't find a quiet place. I had to be masked inside. So, can you guys hear me? Okay. The other option would be
Yeah.
for me to get in my car, but I don't really want to sit in my car.
It's great. We can hear you and see you perfectly.
Okay, good.
Well, I'll welcome you to the Cape Cod Museum of Art, Vision 2020. I'm in the gallery with Bendon. I'm the co-curator.
2021.
2021, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, we did lose
Really
that
Original
year.
2020s turned to 2021. Thank you, Ben. And we want to thank you very much for participating in this exhibit. We hope you're able to join us Saturday night because it really is an outstanding exhibit. But I'll let Ben and Deborah talk to you. We do have your works on display,
They look
of course, in this
beautiful.
section. And again, thank you for participating in this exhibit. I hope to meet you one day.
Oh, well, I hope to meet you on Saturday.
Great.
Oh, I'll be there for sure.
Wow.
And it's an honor to be in the show. Thank you for including me.
Well, thank you.
We were talking. Go ahead, Deborah.
No, go, Benton.
Well, I was just going to say we were talking about how some of the artists in this exhibition are using materials that people might recognize and might know about, but the way that they're used in this exhibition and the artists use these materials are innovative and unusual and in many cases extraordinary, like these.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you included that one piece,
Oh, it's
the
beautiful.
Empress of Maladies, because I think it's such a great, I mean, all of these are glazed, obviously, but that one in particular was a kind of wonderful, you always sort of hope that there will be I don't know, something you didn't expect. And in that case, I had the glaze kind of reacted. I really, really loaded it on, kind of wanting the piece to feel like kind of dipped in color and dripping with it. And the drips that are sort of all over it, almost like the foaming was not what I expected, but it was kind of something I was hoping for something like that to happen. But I think that's a good example of using where I'm, using the material in a way that I'm trying to have some control over it, but also sort of flirting with being a little out of control.
You mentioned Empress of Maladies. Is that a subtitle?
So all the pieces have sorry, not all of them. In fact, 2 out of 3 of the pieces that you have in the show are kind of slightly earlier generations where I just was naming them based on the color and the form. And I began to start naming them almost like one name with the color and form as a kind of subtitle. So because they felt, they often had, certainly don't have a narrative intention, but they were often about some kind of, the titles end up often being about something that was flowing through my mind in the making. And so they become a little more poetic, and the repetitive kind of nature of the work, it's very much like there's something very similar in making it for me to like a prayer bead, a mala, or there's so many different prayer bead traditions, and that repetitive kind of motion and repeating a mantra or repeating a kind of thought process began to sort of play into the title more. And that one actually, I happened to be listening to the book Emperor of All Maladies when I was building that. So of course, it seems kind of funny that I would have pulled from that title, but I also, this work there are echoes of many different kinds of structures in my mind in making this work. Things like flocks of birds, murmurations of birds, or and certainly kind of molecular and cellular structures are really kind of living structures are what are at play for me in making these forms. So it actually just felt like it was a little bit of an in-joke to myself, I admit, but it was also, it felt like a fitting title. Especially because the glaze came out the way it did. That's really what brought it back to that, Empress of Maladies. It felt kind of a little toxic,
But I think what happened with the glaze, when people look at it, I think it really heightens the intrigue and curiosity of how this piece came to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the glaze on these pieces is very important, and with all of them, I almost start with a color in mind, and I'm really interested in the kind of emotional language of color. And like I said before, with all of these pieces, I wanted them to feel not like there was a glaze applied, but like they had been sort of dipped in pure color in some way. So yeah. With all of these, I have created the glaze myself. They're original glazes that I formulate kind of. I might be using a base that I've used before, but I know that I want a very particular color. So I'm kind of playing around with getting that color. And yeah, so the glaze does end up being a very important part of the piece.
Joe, I have a question about the structure. Like, how do you even
How do I make that?
keep, well, basically, yes. I mean, because as far as keeping the form and not having it collapse, because things have to dry, obviously. So how do you build the structure?
Yeah.
How do you build a form?
Question. I love talking about it because I think when you look at them finished, it seems kind of.
Oh, we lost.
And it's all about kind of starting. I start.
Oh, something stopped.
This is simply a matter of attaching a loop to a loop, and there isn't usually a top and bottom defined at the beginning. So I'll kind of hold it in my hand, and I might have 3 or 4 loops attached on the first day, and they all have to be supported with foam and other things while I'm working. But then I have to let that sit for a day wrapped up. And one of the things about working with clay for a long time is that you really become a master of figuring out exactly what clay can do when, what it's capable of, and what its limitations are. And this work is kind of about really knowing that and also pushing its limits a little bit. So one of these pieces would probably take about a week to build. And each day I can only do so much. And then I have to let it kind of, I actually have to kind of rehydrate the older, drier parts and also allow them to, allow the newer ones to set up and stiffen. So, and then in the first few days, I'm turning it over as I work. And eventually I kind of make a decision about where the bottom is going to be, and I build up from there.
it's interesting how there's a past, present, and future in the process of making them, because to me, it almost looks like there's some type of map or some really complicated time travel or electron pattern that seems to live in multiple places at once.
Yeah,
So
I love that. That's a wonderful way of thinking about it. And that does touch in some way on, people ask me what these pieces are about, and their origins, the origin of this body of work was actually when I, many years ago, I mean, at this point, the seeds for the piece came in the, early 2000s, and I had just moved to New York, and I just finished graduate school, and I was totally unsure about where I was going. And I began to do these sketches of like paper knots. And it was actually about kind of sitting with uncertainty and fragility and just being there with it. And I became interested in, I started to think, well, what if I tried making these out of clay? And, that was a whole other set of fragilities and uncertainties. But I think that sort of the somehow time is a very important aspect of this work. And it's sort of like I never can plan where it's going. So I have to be, I sort of know what the parameters are because I've learned to sort of work with them, but they're not the point of the piece. And I think something of its presence when it's finished is that I really don't know where it's going. And they are a little bit on the edge of collapse all the time.
Well, and with something that has so much glaze and glass on it, that really is capturing something in motion. So you've taken a piece of artwork that's has a timeline to it and decided when to freeze it. And who knows, maybe someday it could be heated up again and continue on its path.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Or other things may happen. I mean, I know some artists work with kind of breaking and reassembling work after it's finished, and not through a ceramic process, but through other processes like kintsugi kind of processes. So I could, there's, someday. But yeah, I think that sort of, the other thing for me about these is that they're so airy. They're the negative space and the shadow is such a big part of them. And so there's also a feeling of kind of the negative, the absences and the emptiness is as much part of the work as the solid and the presence. Where could I have gone? Where else could I have gone with that form? Kind of it's sort of still there as part of the piece. And a lot of my other work is, I was originally a potter for kind of my early career, and I went into sculpture, but have always kept a certain foot in the vessel world, and the idea of a container as maybe more of a metaphorical, empty, something meant to hold emptiness or time, or and I think these, even though they're obviously not vessels, they still kind of capture that in a way. I mean, they're sort of related to that idea.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
The open space, the negative spaces have a lot of energy. So it's very alive. Mm-hmm. So it does, it contains energy.
Yeah, I'm not going to put a flower in them though.
No.
They're wonderful
structures. Flowers. I love flowers.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for taking a moment from your schedule and joining us tonight at the Cape Cod Museum of Art.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person and seeing the whole show.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jody.
Good night.
Thank you. See you
Bye-bye.
Saturday.
Bye.
See you
Bye-bye.
Saturday. Bye.
We're so
All
glad
right.
you're
No-
part of the exhibit.
Okay. Okay, we're going to welcome Warren Seelig to the Cape Cod Museum of Art. And I'm standing in front of his beautiful work of art that he's going to talk about. And again, we say it's Vision 2021. And go ahead, Warren.
Okay, you were just introduced by Sis, Warren, and we're looking at your
Shadow carpet?
shadow rock wall here, and
Right.
and I guess, do you have anything initially to comment on about their inspiration or about the work itself?
Well, that work itself is the end product of years worth of other kinds of work that led up to it. I mean, that you're looking at a textile there, in a sense. I mean, my whole background is, obviously, I've mentioned that before, has been involved with textiles. In fact, my family, I come from a textile background, whereas my great-grandfather, I'm the fourth generation textile person. My great-grandfather was a woolen mill superintendent in Massachusetts, and both my grandfather and my father were textile machine designers. And as a kid, my father was amazingly inspirational as far as the kinds of textile machines he used to design, and I was fascinated by them. In fact, I used to emulate his drawings, his patent drawings, not knowing exactly what they were, but liking what they looked like. But then also if you've ever seen a jacquard loom which is a precursor, by the way, to the computer, which is an amazing kinetic sculpture. I mean, I was not so much involved with that I care about the textile I was looking at, but I was more interested in the kinetic activity of the machine that actually produced the textiles. So, but I sort of stayed away from textiles for a long time until I began to see non-commercial kinds of textiles happening in the world in a number of exhibitions, and then went off to look at the College of Textiles in Philadelphia and end up being fascinated and being really mesmerized by that, and that drew me into the whole idea of maybe being involved with textiles, but maybe from the art point of view. So.
Yeah. Well, I know that you work in many different materials. This one happens to be stone and with this a steel armature, but
Right.
But there's and it's interesting that you translate textiles into the inspiration of textiles into different mediums.
Right. Well, that has a lot to do with the fact that, I mean, these things are, even though they're made of steel and stone, I mean, I've worked with all kinds of materials where you can look at the object, which is stone, and the shadow, and then also you look at the others where I've worked with all kinds of lucite and all kinds of polypropylene materials that you can see through or that project light onto the wall behind the work. But the same logic, and oftentimes, but the same inspiration that I was involved with in making textiles also occurs when I'm making these shadow fields. Which are, I mean, they're patterned surfaces. They have they're kind of an organic. I look at textiles as a cellular array, as many parts are organically interconnected to create the whole, and that's kind of what this piece is about. One of the problems with a group exhibition is you don't get to see a variety of ways these things happen or where they came from. So you only have one thing there to look at. But these things really did evolve over a period of time. The early textiles were woven. I've also worked, in more three-dimensional skeletal skin forms. In fact, in skeletal form skins, skeleton and skin forms that were woven, and then later spoken axle pieces that hung out into space. Some of those pieces were as large as 60 feet. So we did some large-scale public sculptures in those ways, but this is just the evolution of those ideas that now is returning more to the wall. But I think I've always enjoyed working with light and shadow, and interested in the way the objects and their shadows, the way they combine to create a space, and that combination of shadow and object is what shadow field is. And for me, it really is it's a sensation. It's a way just the whole mixture of light and shadow on the wall, where you're not sure what is real and what is not, which is an interesting metaphor for, I think, today, as far as what is real and what is not real, politically and environmentally, whatever. But yeah, so it's hard in a nutshell, in a short period of time, to really describe the whole gamut of experiences that go into sort of making these things. But and some of the works, these works, stone is strong, or the object is strong, and the shadow is secondary. But there have been shadow fields where this shadow is actually more powerful, or more visible than the objects that are projecting the shadow behind. So yeah.
Warren, I have a question for you. We all have our medium, oil painter, printmaker, sculptor, and you're making reference to textile. What's the origin of textile? What does it make reference to? Because I'm limited to.
Is weaving.
It's a way of weaving?
It is literally weaving. I mean,
okay.
The textile doesn't have a lot. I mean, the conventional notion of what a textile is doesn't have much to do with what you're seeing there. It's more the way I've interpreted it through having been involved in the process of making a textile.
Okay.
Which is a uniquely organic process. It's not. I always think about painting as something where you're sort of spreading icing across the surface of a canvas or cake or whatever. Whereas a textile, you're really building or making that surface happen organically, and that's that physical connection with the physical world in terms of making a surface. That tapestry, all those areas of textiles are where you're building from scratch the surface, as opposed to laying paint or laying a pencil or a brush on top of that surface. So that's kind of what this thing is about. It's actually a surface that's created organically, but it's physical, and it's and it's interconnected in an organic way.
That's an excellent response. Thanks.
If that makes any sense.
No, it's perfect.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
When I think of textile, I also think of a process, a repetitive process. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
And I was wondering if I can see that there must have been an enormous amount of work and repetitive work in order to create this incredibly large, monumental wall.
It's absolutely one of the more labor. I mean, just like the weaving process is labor intensive. I mean, that process of building that surface is labor intensive as well. And it's also field. I mean, I've always, I've studied. I love the whole pattern field, color field sort of painting that's going on historically. But then those people were in fact, if you look and listen to a lot of the artists and a lot of the theoreticians about pattern and color field, they say they revert back to abstraction coming from the decorative arts, coming from textile phenomena. So this is something that goes way back. And in fact, if you know the constructivists, they're a group I was in love with since graduate school. Just their kind of way of thinking, where I'm not so much interested in the work being symbolic as I am interested in the work being itself, and the whole notion of sort of freely invented forms. Just like the whole idea of freely invented notes to create music. This is something that's very strongly related to that. George Rickey, who was a brilliant sculptor, but also writer. His book Constructivism was one of the more influential books I've ever read, and it was something I found in graduate school, and I was totally mesmerized by it, because my own thinking, my own notes from my notebook actually almost were in direct analogy, directly connected, I thought, to the way he was thinking. But yeah.
It's fabulous.
Is this coming through okay in terms of recording?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Beautifully.
Yes. Excellent.
I wish you could see it, and I'm so happy that you will be here for the reception and get to see all the works, because you were here, didn't install yours, but there was a lot going on, and it certainly looks better now that everything is in place.
No, I saw I had some friends who came by and were surprised to see the piece there, and sent me. I think I sent
Yes.
Yeah.
of her children in front of the piece. But she's a student, who's an artist who lives in Albany, but was out in the Cape and happened to stop at the museum and was surprised to see the work there, which is nice. Nice to have that family photograph there.
You mentioned you were going to be going to Switzerland. Has that happened already?
No, it's Sweden, and that's all being put together right now. And it probably I think it's about 9 months that's going to happen. But I've got to go there to install a piece even slightly larger than that piece that's there in the gallery. But that becomes part of a permanent collection. It's not just going to go there temporarily. It's going to go into their permanent collection. Through Helen Durrett, who's a scholar, writer, gallerist, from Philadelphia, who's putting together a collection. But we found a philanthropist who came up with the resources to purchase the piece for the museum. So that's a nice thing to happen.
Warren, I had a question also. When you were selecting the stones, because I noticed you and Deborah, when you were putting it up, and you balanced the larger stones, the smaller stones, the stones that, went in a certain area. Did you do that for balancing the structure or for the shadow, or why was it important to hang them in a certain way?
What it was, that the way I build these things, though, is that the grid is very kind of fixed. But what I do, when I compose the piece, I actually have a whole reservoir of stones. And I start putting them on, but I compose them by pruning those steel tips with a pair of iron clippers.
Okay.
And so I puzzle those pieces. The pieces are puzzled into place, but they're intuitively arranged in a composition. So I can't explain how that happens. It just happens by looking at the overall field. But so larger and smaller happen just depending on how the whole thing evolves, because it evolves from one end to the other, and it's sort of arbitrary, but in the end I sort of put it all together in a kind of satisfying feel for me. But large and small happen just intuitively, and they're puzzled, and like say the what I call the stems are clipped to accommodate the stone, but then when I have to after I install it, the first time, and then remove the stones, then reinstall it. I sort of have to. I follow that same suit. I sort of know what larger stones or smaller stones fit on each of the brackets, because there's 7 stones on each bracket there. But yeah,
Well,
if that makes any sense.
It's been getting a great response here. We're so proud to have it here in the museum.
No, it looks great. The lighting is especially good. Even like the photograph I had that the friend sent, I just love the way the light hits the tips of the lighter areas. This is a whiter stone piece compared to other stone pieces that have a mixture of dark and light. But just the way the light's hitting those stones is really satisfying.
Now,
really
can we ask also, are your stones from your area?
Oh yeah, they're all from one particular beach. Well, they're from several places, but one place in particular here, not far from my house.
Well, thank you.
I love the way that you compared it to music, because this is a symphony, and everyone loves to hear it and see it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing you at the reception, and thank you so much for participating in this exhibition.
Oh, no, it's been great, and really enjoyed it, and I think it looks great in that. I really like the way it looks in that space, especially. So that's good. I'm happy with that. So
Thank you, Warren. We'll see you Saturday. We're
Thank
thrilled.
you. I hope your drive is easy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Okay, so that was... Welcome, Christine, to the Cape Cod Museum of Art, Vision 2021, Vision 2021. And I'm standing in front of your works as we've put them together on this beautiful wall. And I'm going to turn this over to Benton and Deborah, who are on the face side of this. But again, thank you so much for participating in this exhibit. It's been received so beautifully. And you know I'm crazy about your work, so here we go.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it's almost difficult to show over Zoom because people are going to think this is three-dimensional. But I'm gonna pull up to it here and show that it's actually a birch veneer with encaustic. It's, no matter what angle you look at it, it looks three-dimensional. Well,
It's a beautiful
you'll just have
piece.
to take our word for it that it is much flatter than it appears. How did you do this?
Well, as you said, it's encaustic. What I did was, it's actually a piece of plywood with a corner cut off. So it's really a rectangle with one corner cut off. And I made it appear to be a box just by painting on it. And what I did was I painted dark colors first and I probably had 4 or 5 different layers going from dark to light. And then I chipped away at the light. And so the deeper I chipped, the darker it got. And that's how I painted. And I painted it with encaustic, as you said, which is beeswax and damar resin boiled together. And I buy beeswax and the damar resin, and then I put it in a crock pot and mix it together. It's 7-to-1. And there is
It's a lot of wax in that.
there is a lot of wax and there's a lot of chipping. It's hard to do a piece that big.
Yes, it's beautiful.
What does the form represent? It definitely looks like a vessel of some kind. Does it have
It makes me want to step right in there.
Well, it's funny.
Sit inside.
I did Photoshop myself in it once. All of my work is sort of based on, to begin with, I was interested in just figuring it all out, like categorizing everything and figuring out, I was very sort of black and white, and I wanted to just, figure stuff out. And then so the box is sort of a metaphor for sorting. And it's also the fact that it's fake is sort of a nod to how impossible that all is. So,
okay.
So all of my pieces have some sort of a rectangle or a reference to a box or are a box so far. And it's just comforting to me to pretend like, and knowing I'm pretending that I can stack these things and create order. And then on the same sense, I'm talking about like categorizing and maybe belonging and status. And
and all of this. And boxes are a really neat way to organize. And and they also refer to the grid. And I used to be a graphic designer, so we wanted grids and exact things.
What I love about your work, Christine, is that myself, I would want to crawl in there, like these little holes. Maybe it's a visual crawling in, but I want to go inside your work. like all of the sculptures, the side little peaks. They're just beautiful. They're intriguing.
Well, I think the wax helps too, just because it's so, the finish of it is sort of soft and it's natural, obviously, it's beeswax. And then again, for me, the rectangle's comforting, even though on purpose, so this is ceramic, this piece is ceramic. It's called Managing Expectations. And it's sort of a wrangling of, keeping that little box inside the bigger box. And, it all also refers to, just doing the best we can with all of this. And, it isn't perfect, and it's, but it's just sort of, and being sort of on the edge, but also being comfortable. I don't know if that's, and this is just for me. I really expect people to translate the way they want to translate. I usually try to make names that are fairly, that don't tell you what I see.
But I love this, also your black shape on top of this piece, where you want to kind of slide down, but your little waterfall, the little lines here bring you back. Like it takes you a little bit off equilibrium, and then it brings you back in the sketches, and then this little drawing down here. Just beautiful work, Christine. Just beautiful work.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on in this. There's a lot of layers of information in this one, and there's your rectangle on the side.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the way you put it, that there's layers of information, because it does seem like the closer you look, the more you see, and the more you can see, and you can just keep on going, the never ending, how complicated it gets.
Yeah.
How much information is stored in that.
Can I ask you though, as far as the marks you have on this piece, because it's a ceramic base, but then is it a glaze or is that encaustic? How did you get the marks, the pencil, not the pencil thin lines?
Well, it's ceramic, but the ceramic doesn't have any marks in it. The ceramic might even be terracotta, which is orange. So I paint I'm not sure. That one probably isn't, but often mine are. And it doesn't have. It's just for the shape. Usually, sometimes it isn't. But so this one has. Those lines were made by scratching into the wax and then rubbing pigment and then rubbing it off, and it only sticks to the scratches.
Okay,
a lot
that's beautiful.
There's some other marks. There are bubbles in the wax that the pigment goes into, and it is in layers in that. So some are blue, some are black. Sometimes. And it's just, it's what is it called? Pigment pencil or something. It's a big greasy stick of pigment that I put on it.
RNF sticks?
Yes.
Yeah, RNF pigment sticks.
Pigment sticks.
Yeah.
So they're sort of greasy, and I use a lot of the thinner on it, so that they go into those lines. So that's a lot of different ways to make lines in encaustic, as you probably know, but that's in that one. That's what that is.
We were mentioning that a lot of the work in this exhibition, the artists they might be traditional materials in some cases, but the way that the artists are using them is very non-traditional. And it's especially so in your case, because encaustic goes back to the Egyptians, I believe. But I don't think anyone ever decided to put it on ceramic or put string in it.
Yeah.
I think actually string is probably very, I believe it started with the boats, caulking the boats with string and, well, with, I don't know whether it was string, cotton or something like that. And then they painted their boats with it, I believe. That's at least what I've read. So this piece actually is a piece of ceramic and ice and a piece of fabric over it. And the fabric I did a lot of embroidery on, and it's got a couple of layers in some places, and then there is a hole in the center of the fabric, and that has blue pigment in the encaustic, and then I put silver leaf, which I believe is really aluminum. They call it silver, but I think silver would tarnish too easily. So.
So the hole you're referring to is the center,
Yes.
the rectangle.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so the material was like straight down, but you put a hole in the center. Like
Right.
So the stitching on the bottom is on the fabric.
The stitching, there's fabric everywhere except for the center. So the whole thing covered in fabric.
Oh.
You can kind of, if you're there, you can tap it. It makes the fabric hard, and it's okay. It's okay.
It's my little light tap. But so it's the whole thing is fabric on a ceramic.
Yep. And it's stuck on with the wax.
Okay, that's fabulous.
Do you have a preconceived idea when you start a piece like this, or does it just evolve?
This particular thing I actually painted in acrylic a long time ago, and it looks very different, but it's abstracted from a flattened box.
Oh, okay.
So the sides of the box are flattened out, but I just like I like the image of it. And so, it doesn't matter what it is really.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it said to me to begin with. And then I just like I don't know, there was something about it that I wanted to repeat. And a lot of times, like probably many artists, I have pieces of ceramic, and I make those at a different facility because I don't have a kiln or anything. And I just make pieces that, sometimes I have an idea, like the managing expectations. I did have the idea of fitting a box into a box, and then, where the string was going to be there. But often I just make pieces and then bring them all to my studio and start working on them. And, I have a lot of these sort of pillow shapes that I call, that are sort of pillow shapes. And it just sort of happens. I mean, and almost every single piece I have goes through sort of I shouldn't say this, but an ugly adolescence. There's sort of, I'm working on it, and then it goes, oh God, I just don't, I'm sort of pushed it a little too far. But the whole actually.
So, did somebody
and make it, excuse me?
I think we lost you just for a second. Yeah, can you just repeat what you just said one more time, just the last part?
Sure. I think all of my pieces go through some sort of an ugly adolescence, and try to pull them out of that. That is the fun of it in a way. It's sort of like, can I save this piece because I've pushed it too far? And often I can, and often I can't. And the times that I can't, I have stuff sitting around, and I'll maybe someday resurrect it, scrape some stuff off of it, break it. I don't know. But in any case, it's, that's how in general my pieces are, go through a push and pull, and but there is sort of what tethers me to the earth is this rectangle. And I have pieces that aren't quite as rectangular, and I feel uncomfortable about them. But
Yeah.
Well, you know how much we appreciate the work that you, and I also want to thank you for bringing in the extra pieces that we couldn't use, because, Deborah and I, it was like I said, we were kids in a candy shop, but then putting everything in order was a little challenging. And I'm so proud of this last, that we got the encaustic piece and your pieces too. They just look so, the show looks elegant. That's all I can say. It's an elegant show.
from the little I've seen, I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to be, I'm sure it's wonderful. And I want to thank you all, for getting this together. I know it's a lot of work, and I really, really appreciate it.
Well,
Wow.
we appreciate you bringing it.
Yeah, it's exciting to have everything together and to have all these wonderful pieces sort of talk to one another in this space.
Well, good going. I think that's wonderful.
Great, Christine. Well, will we have the privilege of seeing you on Saturday?
You will.
We're looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yes, I will be there, and thank you again so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Benton Jones here at the Cape Cod Museum of Art. We are very lucky to be in the studio of Niho Kazuru, and we are in her studio right now, and I'm at the gallery at the museum. You can see her two pieces installed behind me, and thank you, Niho, for having us over.
Thank you, Benton. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, you know a little bit about me, but I thought I will give a little more background for people.
That would be great.
No.
Yeah.
So I come from a family of ceramics in Japan that we have been working in clay for about 600 years. And I moved here in Boston area when I was about 12. And since then, I've been surrounded by American objects, such as these turned wood architectural details like this. And then in school, for grad school, I went to Hawaii, the University of Hawaii for grad school. And I went there thinking, great location, great place between Japan and America. But what I really found was strong connection between Boston and Hawaii. And I saw a lot of turned wood forms being preserved like it was a symbolic object from New England. And there was a house that was built here in Boston, shipped board by board to Honolulu and preserved at this like a museum house. And this house immediately made me remind me of the house that I grew up in Massachusetts, and forms that I remember being surrounded when I was growing up here. And it really was a big eye-opening experience for me. And so these were, became something that was part of my upbringing, but there's a turned wood technique relates to also wheel thrown ceramics, and
before going to grad school, I was doing a lot of glass blowing, which is also turning technique with the pipe. So
Yeah.
So at the grad school, that's when it all kind of started working with this cast rubber, trying reconfiguring, making molds of these forms and reconfiguring in my way to understand also myself, also to relate myself to this new culture, American culture, and making a connection between Japan, America, in New England that made sense to me.
That's really fascinating. And we were talking earlier with some of the other artists and mentioning that a lot of the materials used in this exhibition are not necessarily unique or unfamiliar materials for sculpture, but the way that they are being used is unique, and the methods that they're being used are unique, and you also are blurring some lines between craft and fine art. Also, it seems, even though I don't really keep those lines very firmly, I like to blur the lines as much as possible.
Yeah.
I feel that wood turning and ceramics and glass blowing sometimes are relegated to fine craft and not always brought into the fine arts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't see the line between fine art, design, even design, fine art, craft. It's all, I believe it's a blend, it's expression. And
Right.
So the piece that you see in the museum.
Turn this around, they can see. Okay, yes.
Right, so yeah, here's those are cast from segments of these kind of turned wood forms.
Okay, so they're stacked on top of one another.
Right, so this is the mold, which I made a mold of this ink rubber. And
Okay.
then this is a segment from the mold. And here's another section from this mold. So this is from around here. So what you see in the museum now, there is segments of these parts that were reconfigured and made into a column. Can you see?
Yeah, they're very translucent, and in this space below the skylights, they really they show the light through them, which is really a wonderful effect that you get with this rubber that you're using.
Right. Translucency, kind of glass-like feel. But so let's see.
Are you going to show us some other things in your studio?
Sure. So let's see. So this is a new piece that I've been working on. This is, again, same turned wood form, but made in fiberglass with auto paint. So you can see this new auto paint is called chameleon paint. So it has different effects as you walk around, or color changes from blue, green to gold. And
yeah, I noticed that those changes. It's really fascinating.
And let's see, and there's some other pieces are panels, so two-dimensional works, but cast and fused onto wooden panels here. So let me back up a little bit and so I can show you. Can you see from there okay?
I can see the red and green
Okay.
panel with the white background.
Yes. So the panels were made using a segment from a three-dimensional object. So I took a segment off of.
So when you say a segment, it's a cross section, almost like a topographical portion.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe a slice or
A slice, okay.
yeah. So this piece right here is this one. And this was used, I took a section from the three-dimensional object and used the positive piece as a mold to cast these panels.
It's incredible how you go so freely from positive to negative and back to positive again, and using whichever one suits your needs at the moment. To be that fluid and versatile must give you a real sense of freedom.
Yes, and I'm always, I think because of my background, just coming from a different culture, I'm always balancing. I feel like I'm always balancing things and looking at things in different ways. And, you know, trying like, oh, maybe we can use mold material. I started using rubber from making rubber molds as a material.
Right.
So one thing leads to me, it's once you start working in the studio, one thing leads to another. And important thing is to keep making, keep working, and you will discover and find new ways of working, and new ideas will start coming by physically making.
I'm going to show the piece, the second piece that we have installed here. The sun is starting to go down a little bit, but it's still glowing, and it looks very edible. The title for this piece is Flower Garlands.
Yes. Yeah.
And this
so
is also rubber, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. So again, those were cast from old New England molds that I would find in flea markets or antiques, functional molds, and took a slice from a section.
Okay.
So something like this. This is.
Okay.
And then I would take a section, a slice from this, and made a mold and cast. Let's see.
Wow.
You can see. This is might be a little hard to see, but you can see close up. I don't know. Can you see?
Oh, I can see. Yeah. So there's a work in progress.
Yes. Yeah. And all the colors are hand dyed.
Okay.
And they're individually hand dyed, so every batch is slightly different.
Well, the work makes me, for some reason, makes me very happy and very engaged and really approachable. We've had students, whole school groups come through the exhibition, and they are just drawn to your pieces. So they communicate with people of all ages. And I think that's the color, the translucency, the scale. There's just a lot of components that get people to engage with them and interact with them. So
That's
thank you so
wonderful,
much.
Benson. That's
Yeah.
great to hear.
It is. It's great to see also. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for showing us in your studio, and I look forward to seeing you again. And thank you so much for bringing these beautiful pieces to Cape Cod.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm just, it's very exciting to fill the space with objects that are so elegant, beautiful, masterfully made, but provoke so much curiosity and interest. I think it's, to me, that is the next level of excitement. That not only do you look at it and go, it's beautiful, but you really are challenged to try to understand how it came to be.
I do have a comment. Someone brought this up, actually Suzanne Paker, the other day, and it's one thing for us to select these beautiful works of art. It's another, and people comment on how they were presented. And I have to thank you, Deborah and Benton. We worked hard at making each artist stand out. And that was noted the other day as far as their space around the work. People can see them. Because you can have great works of art, but without placing them properly, it would be a different show. So thanks to you and Benton and everybody else that was here stumbling along. You did a terrific job.
Well,
Yeah.
so yeah, I will extend those thanks to the artists
Yes.
and to Deborah and to you, Sis, for putting this together. I think you have great vision. Even if it was delayed a year, it was worth the wait.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
And